It's Ana Pacheco, SantaFe101.com. My guest today is Linda Trujillo. Linda, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
And I know you wear many hats in your job as a superintendent. So go ahead and explain your complete title and all the things that you oversee, and then we'll go ahead and get started on all these exciting things you're working on.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here today. I really appreciate this. We regulate well over 500,000 licensees in New Mexico, and we have construction industries, we oversee manufactured housing, we oversee financial institutions, securities, alcohol regulation, we've got tobacco regulation, and then we've got a multitude of boards and commissions, everything from massage therapy to body art to acupuncture and oriental medicine. And the newest of our family is, of course, the Cannabis Regulation
And I definitely want to get into that during the interview, but since you mentioned liquor, let me just ask you, I think I heard this last legislative session for the state of New Mexico, there was a lot of different things, a lot of things that have changed, I guess, kind of in a progressive, position. But didn't something happen with the liquor licenses, that they're not like so expensive now, or something changed there?
That's right. There is some reform that's happened to our alcohol regulation and oversight, and some of that's rolling out starting on July 1st. So licensees that already have a license can increase to spirits. It's like a restaurant that's got a license can increase to spirits. And we're trying to make it as simple as possible. New licensees in that area are going to still have to start at the beginning as usual, but we're going out for rule hearing, and those rules are supposed to be published as early as June, like maybe even yesterday. So those are going to be published and out for public comment right now, if not in the next couple days.
Because what I understand is like there was a finite number of liquor license, and they became really expensive, and it was really hard for people to come and do business in New Mexico because they could not access these types of liquor licenses. So that is going to be changing, correct?
That is correct. And the real issue was not even just the cost of them. The problem is that they started being centralized in urban communities. And so rural communities where they weren't going to make nearly that amount of money to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a license, were not able to open up restaurants that could serve spirits. And so this will actually be a good economic development boost for New Mexico, and particularly in our rural communities.
So it'll provide a fair playing field. And
that's correct.
What will the cost approximately of, what's the approximate cost of one of these licenses going?
So that's out for hearing right now. And so I can't give you like a definitive. Those are all up for public comment. And after this 30-day period of public comment, then the department division director, Mr. Vallejos, will make final decisions about the rules. They'll get published, and then the public will be notified as to what the next steps are to get licensed.
But I'm kind of hearing that they won't be as expensive as they were in the past.
No, they're going to be reasonable. And they're not going to be based upon some sort of limited supply. That's what leaves the price down. What was making them expensive was not necessarily the licensing fee that the department was charging. It was the fee that someone could take a license that they owned and they would sell it or lease it to somebody else, because there was that limited number of licensees. And so now they're only going to have to pay the fees to the department. Those fees that are in excess of hundreds of thousands of dollars were never coming to the department. They were going to the people who owned the licenses and were selling them or leasing them to somebody else.
So that's going to now eliminate kind of that middleman. These people that own the licenses, they can't charge exorbitant fees any longer.
I don't think it's going to eliminate them, but I think it's going to reduce I think it's just going to open up the door.
And so if somebody had purchased one of these licenses from somebody that owned it, and going forward, they could just get a new license from the state and not have to work with that individual with the expensive license.
Yeah, it's a little bit different license, Anna. And I'm not really prepared to give all of the details to that, but there is a little bit of distinction between them. So the other licenses, yes, are potentially going to reduce in value to some extent, maybe. But that's not something that's in relation to what we're doing. We just license, and that other piece of it is separate from what we do. So I don't want to say that their value is going to diminish, because there's a lot of conversation about whether that will happen or not. But these new licenses will in fact make it easier for restaurants in rural communities to have access to be able to sell spirits.
Oh, good. Well, I think that's a real positive move going forward. So let's spend the rest of the time in this interview with the real big, I guess the biggest news in New Mexico. I know it's been several years in the making, but the legalization of cannabis in New Mexico is finally, it's finally it's a reality. And so I understand I had interviewed Senator Liz Stefanik, and I believe it won't be happening until next April, when it's actually, you can go to a store and buy it or something. But so everything's in the works right now. So people who might be watching this interview, maybe they're entrepreneurs, they want to open up a cannabis shop or some type of business, or so kind of shed light on that. But the first thing I want to ask you before you do this, I was thinking about this before the interview. Did you kind of follow is there a standard playbook, like maybe Colorado, it's been legal there for a while, or some of the other states? Is there like a standard industry protocol that all the states are now following, or do states just do something on an individual basis?
Yeah, it really is still on an individual basis. There is some kind of developing norms, best practices that are coming up, because there are so many different states that are moving into adult use cannabis. Of course, we've got the initial piece, which was the medical cannabis, that's been happening in New Mexico for years now, and we're just expanding it into adult use, which will have some different issues that need to be addressed, some different types of rules that need to be created. But for the most part, it has to be specific to the state, because you've started with this medical program and it probably looks different in each state. And then as you roll out the adult use, some standards, but this law is really very specific to New Mexico.
And I had read before that people that already had like the medical dispensaries, that they were kind of nervous. They didn't want this law to pass because that could affect their business. So how are they going to stay in business if anybody can just buy marijuana now?
Yeah, so this is the thing, is that the producers, those licenses, we have to start issuing new producer licenses no later than September 1st. So we're in the process of creating the rules for that right now. All the other business types, like you mentioned, the dispensary, retail, manufacturer, those we don't have a deadline to meet until no later than January 1st. But everybody, whether they're doing adult use or whether they're doing medical exclusively, everybody has to have produced at least 25% of their sales have to be for medical. And that's how we're protecting the medical cannabis. The fear is not necessarily that the medical cannabis is going to go away. The fear is more that the adult use is going to take away from the medical. And so our responsibility is to make sure that there's enough cannabis in the market, but that there's not too much so that it then gets into the illicit market. Because although you can grow in New Mexico and sell in New Mexico, you cannot grow in New Mexico and sell it in Arizona. So you can't cross cannabis across state lines until it becomes federally legal. So whatever we grow here, we have to be able to ensure that it's going to be able to be sold here. And if there's too much cannabis, then it's highly probable that it will go into an illicit market. So what we're trying to avoid is that we don't want a shortage of cannabis so that the medical patients would not have access to that.
And, I'm wondering, I've never gone into one of these dispensaries, but so I'm assuming that the medical, they really say, well, this kind of marijuana is for backache and this one's for depression. But when you go into like a regular retail store, it's not going to have any of that, will it? Or will it?
Yeah, it will. It most likely will. So again, you're going to still be selling to medical patients, right? And so they call them bud tenders. And there's some training available at Northern New Mexico College. and they've had like a 400% increase in, they've got a waiting list now of people who want to take those courses. But once you become a bud tender, then you're able to help patients and or adult use cannabis users to make determinations about what different kinds of cannabis do. We went into a dispensary in Albuquerque because we've been trying to tour some of the production facilities where they grow it, a manufacturing facility where they extract the oils and they turn them into different edible and vaping products. And then we went into this dispensary, and it's really, I mean, it really looked like a spa, Anna. Like it was like walking into this spa where you were looking to buy some specialty soap or some, you know, specialty body lotion. It was really, really nice. The atmosphere was calm. It was very clean. They had great displays, and they had bud tenders up at the counter who were talking to patients and explaining to them what different types of cannabis help with. And, you know, it's probably likely that I think when we think of adult use, we think of like somebody going and buying a bottle of vodka. I think you're still going to see people using adult use for medicinal type purposes, because you can purchase it in like creams. Like if you've got sore muscles, they showed us one that you can rub onto your sore muscles and it takes away the pain. They've got a variety of different ways that you can use the cannabis that aren't necessarily just to get high on.
Right. And will your department set the pricing for cannabis?
No, we won't set the pricing for cannabis. It'll be a supply and demand, right? So if there's not enough cannabis, then the prices could go up. We're trying to avoid that. If there's too much cannabis, the prices could drop dramatically. And while we want to make sure that the prices are affordable for the people who want to buy it, we also want to make sure that they don't drop so far that you know, people can't stay in the business.
Right. And here in New Mexico, we do have 4 distinct seasons. So I'm assuming most of this growing is taking place in greenhouses, correct?
You are right. And or warehouses. This was really something new, that because I just hadn't known anything about cannabis, to be honest with you, before we started, you know, really digging into the research and going and touring these places. And, you know, I thought they grew it from seed. No, they don't. They have mother plants, and they take clippings from them and dip them in like a root solution, and then they grow them. So they're cloning them to make sure that they have female plants, and to make sure that they keep certain varieties. And there's different smells. I've walked from room to room, and rooms will have different smells because they'll be growing a different kind. I remember walking into one room and thinking, it smells like oranges in here. It's very different. So there's a real science to this. And so, yeah, there's a lot that's going to be grown indoors because you can get up to 4 seasons. But there are some folks who like to grow outdoors. And so what we've learned is that indoors, the plants are kind of forced to grow shorter and wider. And that's how they get the bud to produce itself. But outdoors, they grow up fairly tall, even taller than us. And they produce larger portions of bud, which is what is for sale. So it really depends. I mean, some customers want an outdoor product that's grown organically, and other customers prefer an indoor product that could still be grown organically, but it could be grown up to 4 different seasons a year.
And so that'll be kind of like an option. Do you want this outdoor version or an indoor version?
That's correct.
And is it
That's
just the
correct.
sizing, or would the strength be different, or what's different about it?
You know what?
Besides the size?
Yeah, it really is the size and the strength. I don't know the science behind that. I know that there are different THC values in different cannabis. I don't have the science around how that happens, but part of the testing that has to be done is to determine what the THC content is in the cannabis before it's sold. and that'll be done in batches. Right now, I think it's done in batches of 5 pounds. We're proposing that that go up to 15. We did get some public comment that thinks that it should go up to 50. So we're looking at the public comments right now, but that THC will be tested by a cannabis testing laboratory, which we have one right here in Santa Fe.
And I'm wondering, because, we are the chili capital of the world, New Mexico is. I wonder if our great soil or our climate or something, if we're going to make better grass than other states, or does that make a difference? I wonder.
I wonder too. I've heard that the southern region of New Mexico, where a chili grows, is a great place for hemp to grow, but you don't want hemp and cannabis to be growing in the same place, because they can destroy each other's crop. So they have to be far apart, so that you don't have hemp turn into cannabis and have THC value to it. So I think there's going to be a lot of growing in greenhouses, and we've heard that there's a lot of folks looking to rent, lease or purchase warehouse space. And I've seen warehouses refitted to be an indoor greenhouse.
And so are you getting any, like say, speaking about like southern New Mexico, are you getting any farmers from down there saying, hey, I want to switch from green chili to marijuana? Are you getting farmers that are saying, maybe this is what I want to try?
So far, we have not. So far, we're under the impression that green chili is safe. Because
Okay.
I brought that up a couple of times. I said, I don't want to lose my green chili. I don't want this to take over. But so far, we have not heard that green chili growers are going to transition into cannabis.
And are you finding that it's local New Mexicans who are venturing into this industry, or are we getting people from out of state who are going to move here because they already have, perhaps they have the expertise from other states? What are you seeing?
You know what, I haven't really seen anything yet because we haven't started taking applications, but our goal is to incentivize local New Mexicans to do that. We had a workshop yesterday with the Economic Development Department. It was an hour and a half, and we had presenters talk about where can you get help with business plan. There really isn't any money available for capital to invest in a business. So it could be that folks are going to have to work together in maybe like a cooperative. Maybe 5 people will work together. Or you could have a small business, what we're calling a micro business, who starts with 200 or less plants. And that's less costly to do. Maybe they start with 50 plants. Maybe they start with 100. There still are some security things that have to be done. So there's money that's going to have to be invested. But there are options to kind of stair step and ladder up. And we're hoping that in the next legislative session, that we'll be able to ask for some money to provide resources, banking resources for people to get loans, because the federally, licensed banks are unable to provide funding for these businesses. And that seems like it's the biggest barrier right now, is to get capital to invest in to start your business.
So that's interesting, because it's not federally regulated throughout the entire country. Federal banks cannot do business loans.
No, they can't do business loans. And even the state banks, what we learned is that state banks can be depositories for money that's earned by, growing and selling cannabis. But the cost of it is so much higher because they still have to report that it's money that is coming from what is federally considered an illicit market. And so even though, the federal government isn't doing anything to prosecute people on that, the banks still have to report that information, and it's pretty labor intensive. And so we also have to look at some solutions for that, so that our banks here, local banks that are state chartered, can feel as though they're protected in helping to give these small businesses investment money for capital.
Now, in terms of taxing cannabis, is that going to be like at a higher rate than other types of taxes, or how will that work? Do you know?
Yes. So and the taxing part is not my specialty, but I'll give you just kind of a rundown of the basics of what I know. I believe it starts out at 12% and it can go up 1% a year until it gets to 18%. I think that was it. My numbers may be off just a percentage or two, but the state tax and revenue department is going to be collecting that. There'll be a portion that goes to the state, and then there'll be a portion that stays with the local community.
Okay. And then in terms of, I know this is also new to you, and so pardon me if I'm wanting you to just give me all the answers. I know you're kind of learning as you go along, but so if somebody's watching this, are there, like, what are the areas in this cannabis industry where people, might be needed now? Would it be like helping in the warehouses where they're helping to grow the product, in packaging? Would it be marketing, distribution? What are some of the areas that people, if they're watching this interview, will say, well, I'm a whiz bang at blah, 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 blah. I think this is for me. What do you think?
You know what? It's wide open right now, which is really the cool thing about this industry, is that we're really just opening the doors to all kinds of different opportunities. So a lot of what we hear conversation about is, how can I be a business owner? But there are other opportunities, and there's opportunities to work in the production, right? That's the farmer. Those are the people who grow. One of the production sites that we went to, there were these young kids, and they were trained biologists and scientists from UNM and NMSU. And they were working in, cloning these plants. It's a real scientific thing. It's not, you got to have certain soil. You got to have the soil, at the right pH level. You got to have water. You got to have the right fertilizer, because not all fertilizers are okay for cannabis or for smoking cannabis. And so it's really a scientific endeavor. It's not like just throwing some seeds in the ground and hoping that they grow. And
like
so
in the old days.
Yes, exactly. And so there's a lot of opportunity, everything from, those scientific things that they're doing to grow it. And then you go into like a manufacturer, and they've got these pieces of equipment that are putting the cannabis in, and they're soaking it and they're spinning it, and it's coming out as oil. And in my mind, I say soaking it and spinning it and doing all of this, but they have all kinds of scientific terms for what that is. They call it a closed system. They use different chemicals to get the oil to come out, and then it spins and some of the chemicals go out of it. It's just really amazing. We saw some folks, some young ladies who are packaging, and they had this little machine, and they were making sure that there was the same amount of extract in each of the little bottles. And then they would take them to another area, and somebody was packaging them into packages, and they were, putting them into containers for distribution. And then when we went to the dispensary, there was the bud tenders. There's going to be people who are delivering, transporting. This law even allows for a courier. So cannabis could be delivered to your home, could be delivered, just like we do Instacart, right? Or Grubhub, those kinds of things. There can potentially be licensees that deliver it from a dispensary to the patient or to an adult user. Now, of course, there's going to be requirements to check ID and to make sure it's not someone under 21, but that's going to be an option. So there really is a range. If you think about all of those different things, those are all very different careers, and they all have the potential for creating jobs in New Mexico.
Well, I have a perfect name for that delivery. It could be called thehighway.com.
I like that.
But I know with the legislature, they just passed some kind of a law where you can now deliver liquor to the home, right? So
that's correct.
Probably the same business that does liquor will do the cannabis.
Well, the thing is that you can't do that. So you can't mix the two.
Oh,
and
you
so
can't.
If you're delivering cannabis, you can't be delivering alcohol. If you're selling cannabis, you can't be selling alcohol. If you're selling alcohol, you can't be selling cannabis. That's the one thing that's limited in this law, that you cannot have alcohol and cannabis combined. And so it's possible, we've talked about, maybe you're a courier and you're delivering alcohol, and then you get a call to deliver some cannabis. You're going to have two different licenses, but you're not going to be able to have them in the car at the same time.
Okay, okay. And so I know there's so many, is there a number of licenses? Is there a finite number, or it's wide open, right?
It's
So
wide
after
open.
this interview, of course, before I post this interview, I'm sure you'll put it on with all your information, like where people need to go to what website, and they can look at all the requirements if people are interested in this. So
Yes.
be able to get going forward. And I also think I read that it'll be legal if somebody wanted to just like for their own use, they can grow a few plants in their backyard. Is that correct?
They actually can grow up to 6 plants if they're 21 or older, or they can grow up to 12 plants if there's 2 individuals in the household that are 21 or over. Now, it's important because there are some protections for a homeowner. So if you're leasing or renting your residence, you're going to need to check with your landlord, the person who owns that home, that residence, to make sure that it's okay for you to grow that.
Okay, well, good. Well, Linda, our time is definitely up. I knew this was going to fly by. It's been so informative. I want to thank you so much. I know you have a grueling schedule. It was super of you to agree to this interview today, and I know it's going to be of help to people. And are there any parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, I'm going to put the website, Anna, in the chat box, but I don't know how to make it show up. But
No, that's okay. After the interview, we'll just go ahead and you can get that to me just via email or something. But
perfect.
well, listen, I want to thank you again, Linda. All the best to you, and stay well.
Thank you. You too. It's good to see you.
Take care.